They called it a ceasefire. We called it a slow suffocation with a smile painted on its face. I was running patrol along the Orion exclusion zone when the distress call came in. My name is Yael Devar, Commander, Earth Warship Perseverance. I had been flying this particular stretch of dead, empty space for 9 years, 4 months and 11 days. Not that I was counting. I was absolutely counting. Every pilot in the Earth Defense Fleet counted. We counted because counting was the only thing left that felt like we were actually doing something. You can only file so many incident reports, attend so many council review sessions, watch so many case files get closed with the phrase procedurally sound stamped at the bottom, before counting becomes the one honest act left available to you. The signal came in at 03:12 hours. Low frequency, civilian band, the kind of frequency a cargo hauler uses when its main communication array has been destroyed and someone in the back is holding a cracked emergency transmitter and hoping someone out there can hear them. Those signals have a specific texture, not a sound exactly, but a feeling, like a hand pressing against glass from the other side. The ship was called the Johansson's Dream, a colony transport out of New Oslo Station, carrying settlers bound for Kepler 7 in the Outer Rim. I pulled the manifest on the second ping. 2,312 people. Families mostly, people who had sold their apartments and packed their furniture into cargo containers and decided that a new world, even a difficult and far-off one, was worth the journey. There was a school group from Reykjavik, 41 children between the ages of 8 and 12. They were on an orbital field trip, the kind where teachers promise the kids they will see real stars up close, and the kids spend the whole journey arguing about who gets the window seat and trading snacks and falling asleep against the portholes. I knew all of this within 90 seconds of receiving the signal. I also knew exactly what had happened to them. The Keth patrol vessels had flagged the Johansson's Dream for unauthorized transit. The ship had drifted, or perhaps been pushed by a debris field, or perhaps the navigational computer had made an error of roughly the width of a breath into what the Galactic Council called contested space. The Keth did not ask questions when they found ships in contested space. They had a policy. The policy had a name in their language that translated, roughly, into English as deterrent enforcement. The rest of the galaxy called it something else, but nobody said that out loud, not in the council chambers anyway. In the council chambers, people used the passive voice the way a surgeon uses a scalpel, to cut and to separate, so that the thing that happened could be discussed without anyone being required to say who did it and why and what it meant. I fired up the Perseverance's engines and set an intercept course. Then the notification came through on my terminal. A little icon, green, blinking. Transit permit required. Please submit Form 7 Delta Niner through the Council Coordination Portal. Expected processing time, 14 to 18 standard hours. I sat there looking at that notification for a long time. 14 hours. The Johansson's Dream was already going quiet. The distress signal had dropped to a single pulse every 40 seconds, which meant someone was manually keying it from a failing battery pack. Someone was still alive on that ship, pressing a button every 40 seconds in the dark, and I needed to fill out a form. I filled out the form. I want you to understand what that sentence actually means. I sat in the pilot's chair of the Perseverance, and I opened the Council Coordination Portal on my terminal, and I entered my authorization codes, and my ship identification, and my patrol sector designation, and the nature of the emergency, and the coordinates of the vessel in distress, and the number of souls aboard, and the nature of the threat, and I answered 17 sub-questions generated by the portal's intake system, and I double-checked everything, because an incomplete form would be rejected, and the processing clock would restart from 0, and then I submitted it, and then I sat back, and I looked out at the dark of contested space, where 2,312 people were on the other side of a line I was not permitted to cross, and I waited. I submitted it at 03:19 hours. The response came back at 17:42 hours the following day. Transit permitted. Safe travels, Commander Devar. I got there in 43 minutes once they let me go. There was nothing left to get to. The Johansson's Dream was a field of debris spanning roughly 12 kilometers. Titanium hull plating, personal belongings, cargo containers that had somehow survived intact, spinning slowly in the vacuum, full of somebody's furniture and winter clothes, and one container that I could see was marked with the stickers children put on things, bright colors, a cartoon sun, someone's name written in crayon on the side. The name was not legible from my scanner range. I told myself it was not legible. I did a full sweep. Standard protocol. Looking for survivors. Looking for any sealed compartment. Any emergency pod. Any life sign at all. 43 minutes of full sweep. I found 17 pieces of the ship's identification plaque. I wrote the report. I filed it with the Council Coordination Office, Incident Division. I used formal language. I used the passive voice, the way I had been trained. The ship experienced a containment failure. The ship encountered a structural event. The investigation would determine contributing factors. Contributing factors. I ate lunch after I finished the report. Real food, not rations. I had a meal that someone on the crew had cooked, something with rice and vegetables. And it was warm, and I ate it. And I thought about how strange it was that I was able to eat at all, that my hands were steady, that I could taste the food. That was the part that kept me awake later. Not the debris field, not the 41 children from Reykjavik. Those things lived somewhere in my chest, in a place I had learned to keep locked. Not because I did not care, but because if I opened that place every time it needed opening, I would not have been able to fly the next patrol. 9 years of patrols had taught me the exact dimensions of that locked place. What kept me awake was the lunch, the fact that I ate it, the fact that it had become that ordinary. The council closed the case 6 days later. Procedurally sound, they said. The Keth filed a counter-complaint, noting that the Johansson's dream had crossed into contested space by a margin of 0.003 light-seconds. The council cited Article 14 of the Peacekeeping Accord, which gave patrol vessels authority to act on unauthorized incursion with proportionate force. The council noted with regret the loss of civilian life. The council expressed confidence that all parties would exercise greater care going forward. I read the case closure on a Tuesday. I ate dinner after. The Peacekeeping Accord of 2271 had given humanity 3 things: a containment zone the size of a solar system, a transit permit system that required processing times measured in hours and days, and a formal council designation that the Velhari administrative tongue called Zykoveth, which translated technically as species pending civilizational assessment, and which the Velhari dockworkers at the outer ports used the way you use a word for something that is beneath contempt, but also slightly beneath notice. I had been living inside that word for 9 years. I had buried 17 colleagues inside it. Colleagues who passed away on patrols that got complicated in ways that contested space allows things to get complicated, and whose incident reports went into the same system that took 14 hours to process a transit permit, while someone keyed a dying distress signal every 40 seconds in the dark. Somewhere between the rice and the darkness outside my viewport, I understood something I had been almost understanding for a very long time. Earth was not going to negotiate its way out of this. We had been negotiating since the accord was signed. We had filed forms and submitted permits and attended council hearings and spoken respectfully in chambers, where representatives of 216 species looked at us the way you look at something that has not yet been fully decided. Our diplomats had done everything right. Patient, precise, endlessly, painfully civilized. The kind of civilized that requires enormous strength to maintain when the people you are being civilized toward are filing counter-complaints over 0.003 light-seconds. I went back to my bunk. I lay down. I stared at the ceiling of the Perseverance, which had a small crack running across the lower left corner, that maintenance had patched twice, and that kept reappearing, as if the ship itself was expressing an opinion about the futility of cosmetic fixes. Then I got up, went to my terminal, wrote a message to Admiral Priya Osei at Geneva Orbital Command. No formal language, no passive voice. I wrote, "They will never stop unless we make them stop." I sent it at 0200 hours. She replied at 0204 hours. She wrote, "I know. Be ready." 4 words. I had known Priya Osei for 11 years, and I knew exactly what 4 words from her at 0204 hours meant. It meant she had already been thinking about this before my message arrived. It meant the calculation was done. It meant that something that had been building for a very long time, in places I had not been permitted to see, was about to become something that could not be unbuilt. I went back to my bunk. This time I slept. The Geneva orbital session had 47 species sending observers. They sat in the upper gallery in their delegation groups, and they were very, very still, the way beings get still when they expect to watch something fail and want a clear view of the failure. I had been to this chamber 4 times before, always on the petitioner's side of the floor, always standing at the lectern explaining, in careful and respectful language, why something that had happened to us was unjust, and watching careful and respectful acknowledgement travel around the room without ever catching fire. This time, I had a seat at the main table. Priya Osei sat at the center, 63 years old, silver hair cut short and practical. She wore reading glasses that she pushed up on her forehead when she was working through a problem, and put down on her nose when she had finished working through it, and had already decided. She had been the chief architect of the original peacekeeping accord. 3 years of negotiation. She had called it, at the signing ceremony, a framework for mutual respect among equals. She had believed that when she said it. I had read the transcripts. The belief was genuine and precise, and based on what she understood the galaxy to be at the time. That was the thing about Priya that people who did not know her sometimes failed to understand. They thought the accord and the resolution were contradictions, that the woman who built the peace and the woman who ended it must be 2 different people, or that one of them had made a mistake. They were not 2 different people. She had watched the accord operate exactly as designed for 18 years, and concluded from the evidence that what it was designed to do was the problem. She had her glasses down on her nose when I walked in. The proposal before the floor was called Resolution 7. The full title was the Terran Withdrawal Declaration and Framework for Sovereign Renegotiation. Our legal team had worked on the language for 3 months. Every word had been chosen with care. Withdrawal, not breach, not challenge, not declaration of conflict. Withdrawal. The language of a species that was leaving a table voluntarily and stating the terms under which it would return. The Keth ambassador, a 7-limbed delegate named Revash, who had been the senior Keth diplomatic representative to the council for 11 years, had submitted a formal communiqué before the session opened. A council clerk read it into the record in a flat administrative voice. The communiqué said, "We note with amusement the theatrical posturing of the Omega restricted delegation. Humanity's withdrawal from the accord will be treated as what it legally constitutes, an act of feral species breach. Response will be proportionate, swift, and educationally necessary." The clerk finished reading. The chamber absorbed the words. 4,000 beings making a simultaneous calculation about whether to react and choosing, for the moment, not to. Several observer delegations shifted. The Suri observer went very still in a way that was not quiet at all. In the gallery, Revash made a sound, a clicking, trilling thing that his species produced when something struck them as amusing and beneath serious concern. Priya Osei looked down at the table in front of her. She picked up her glasses, considered them, and set them down again without putting them on. Then she looked up at the gallery and at the main floor. She said, "The vote is called." 11 minutes. Every human delegate voted. Not one abstention, not one delay. No one who needed more time to reflect, or who thought perhaps the moment called for caution. Resolution 7 passed unanimously. I wrote it down. Paper notebook, ink, because I liked the permanence of it, and because I had learned over 9 years that the things worth remembering deserved more than a log entry. I wrote the time, the vote count, the exact sound Revash made in the gallery when the result was announced. Anger was a sweet and familiar thing by then. Not hot, not the kind that shakes your hands and makes you imprecise. The cold, load-bearing kind, the kind you can build on. I had been carrying it for 9 years, and I knew its weight and its shape, and how to hold it without letting it hold me. Outside the chamber windows, Earth turned below us, blue and white, lit by the same sun it had always had, entirely indifferent to the vote that had just happened above it. I had grown up in Tel Aviv looking up at that sky, thinking about what was out there. I had found out. Priya Osei stopped beside me on her way out, already reading something on her tablet, already on to the next thing. She said, 9 months, Commander, not a day more. She was gone before I could answer. I did not need to answer. I already knew what was being built. I had been watching it get built for 4 years, piece by piece, in facilities that did not appear on any official council inventory. I knew what 9 months meant. I knew what we were going to do with it, and what we were going to do it with, and what we were asking of 61 ships and the people inside them. The gallery emptied around me. Rivash passed close enough on his way out that I could smell the metallic edge of his biosignature. He did not look at me. Not yet worth looking at. I closed my notebook, straightened my uniform, walked out through the main floor entrance into the transit corridor, and then to the shuttle bay and sat in the back of the shuttle with the notebook on my knee, and I looked out at Earth turning below, and I thought about the crack in the Perseverance's ceiling, and Lena Marsh's coolant coupling problem, and a cargo container with a cartoon sun sticker spinning alone in a 12-kilometer debris field. 9 months. That was enough. People always want the number first. How many ships did Earth build? How many warships did we commission in those 9 months? They want a large number because a large number makes the outcome feel mathematically obvious. A story where the bigger side eventually became bigger than the other side and then won. They want the arithmetic to explain it. We had 61 warships when we started the 9 months, and 61 when we crossed the line. The Velhari Rapid Response Armada had 340. No construction program was closing that gap in 9 months, and we were not going to try. Gordon Vane, our fleet admiral, had run the numbers personally more than once, and the answer was the same every time. You cannot build your way out of a 5-to-1 numerical disadvantage inside a year. You can do something more useful than that, if you are willing to think about what you are actually trying to accomplish, rather than how to accomplish the thing you are expected to try. We did not try to close the gap. We changed what the gap meant. Every cargo hauler in the outer colonies that could be physically modified was modified. Rail-mounted accelerators adapted from mining equipment designed for asteroid processing, which meant they were already built to handle the kind of stresses that weapons engineers would have specified for targeting hardware. Targeting packages that Owen Clark, an engineer from Birmingham who had spent 4 years in a lab on Titan, had designed and carefully tested on decommissioned drones in restricted space, where the Council's routine monitoring had certain predictable blind spots. Electronic warfare suites. Signal jamming arrays calibrated to Velhari communication frequencies. Point defense systems that looked, to any external scan at standard range, exactly like standard cargo protection equipment. Most of these ships still looked like cargo haulers. They looked like what they had been 3 months before. That was not an accident. That was the most important design decision we made. The hospital ships were the aspect that came up most repeatedly in the post-engagement legal review. I want to be precise about this because precision matters, and because the record sometimes gets distorted. We never used a hospital ship as an attack platform. Not once. Not at any point in the engagement. They were used as decoys, as signal emitters, as positional cover for the movement of other assets. The distinction between those two things is a real distinction, not a rhetorical one, and it mattered to us before the engagement, not as a legal defense we were pre-positioning, but as a line about what we were willing to become in order to win. We had thought about that question seriously and in advance. There were things we would do and things we would not, and the line was explicit, and the people on our side of it had agreed to it before we started. 3 species said yes when we asked. All 3 had been living under some form of council-sanctioned economic restriction for between 15 and 30 years. The Suri, the Dreth Collective, the MAC. In all official records throughout those 9 months, they were listed as neutral parties conducting independent fleet exercises in adjacent space. The record was accurate in every particular. The adjacency was chosen with considerable care by people who understood the geometry of certain council monitoring limitations. They said yes within 48 hours of the first approach. The Suri observer at the Geneva session, the one who went still in that particular way when Ravash made his clicking sound, had transmitted preliminary agreement through a back channel before our shuttle finished its descent from orbital. My crew chief was Lena Marsh, Glasgow. 14 years of mechanical engineering across 3 hull classes. The specific and unusual talent for making components that were never designed to interact, performed together with an elegance that would have baffled and probably annoyed the engineers who designed them separately. She slept 5 hours. She brewed coffee from a kit she kept in a tin, with a Highland Terrier on the lid, and she shared it with no one. The crew understood this without needing to be told, and respected it as a condition of their continuing to work alongside someone who could fix anything. Lena walked the line of retrofitted cargo ships in Lunar Station 7's Bay 4, and looked at them for a long time before saying anything. She said, They are going to think these are supply ships right until the moment they find out otherwise. I said, that is the idea. She said, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Then she went back underneath the nearest hull. Those 9 months were not dramatic from the inside. There was no single transformation. No ceremony marking the end of one thing and the start of another. There was the work. Lena under a cargo hauler at 0200 hours, with a power coupling and a cutting tool, swearing quietly in a way that implied deep technical understanding. Owen Clark surrounded by disassembled Velhari sensor components in his Titan lab, eating protein bars because he kept forgetting to order real food, teaching himself to read the architecture of something that had not been designed to be readable by anyone outside its own species. Gordon Vane in the war room at Mars Station, running the tactical model for the 400th time, looking for the specific window that the math said existed somewhere inside a problem that looked, from most angles, like it had no good answer. The coffee was universally terrible. I want that on record. I was at Lunar Station 7 more often than I was on the Perseverance. The station galley served something it described as coffee that had the color correct and approximately nothing else, and I drank it at 0200 hours more times than I can reconstruct, sitting across from engineers and tacticians and pilots who were all running the same calculation and arriving at the same place, which was, this is going to require us to be very precise. This might actually work if we are precise enough. The other side is not going to understand what they are looking at until it is too late for understanding to help them. Here is what the Galactic Council had genuinely failed to account for when they built their threat assessment models for humanity. They had studied us. We found the assessment files afterward and they were comprehensive. Documented conflict records, behavioral pattern analysis, jury, probability matrices built on historical data going back to first contact. The conclusion the matrices produced was that we were a mid-tier threat species, aggressive under direct provocation, capable of organized military response, but ultimately rational actors who would, when the projected cost of continued escalation exceeded a computable threshold, seek a negotiated settlement. The model was built on an assumption about what rational means. It assumed that rational meant, for us, what it meant for a species that evolved to continuously calculate survival odds and adjust behavior accordingly. A species that fights until the math says stop, and then stops, because stopping when the math says so is rational. We do not fight that way. There is something in what we are, very old and not especially amenable to analysis, that simply does not receive that signal the way the model assumed it would. Other species get the message. The calculation completes. The retreat is ordered. It is sensible. It is how things that want to survive make decisions. We ran toward the burning building. Not just the exceptional ones among us. Not just the ones they put in the histories. Enough of us, consistently enough, over enough centuries and enough different circumstances, that it stopped being an anomaly and started being a pattern that someone trying to predict our behavior should have weighted much more heavily. The Council modeled us as rational actors who would choose survival over principle past a certain cost point. They did not model us as beings for whom certain principles are not separate from survival, for whom the stopping signal sometimes simply does not arrive in a form the body knows how to act on. Gordon Vane briefed the fleet commanders 2 weeks before the crossing date. He did not use the word victory. He said, "What we need from this engagement is not the destruction of the Armada. What we need is to make the cost of continuing to fight us feel, to the people making decisions on the other side, like a number they did not budget for, and cannot absorb without consequence. We are not trying to win a war in a single engagement. We are trying to change what the other side believes a war with us costs. Those are different objectives, and they require different thinking." He looked at the people in the room. He said, "We are going to be precise and coordinated, and very difficult to stop. Not because we have the largest fleet in this corridor, because we have the clearest and most specific understanding of what we are doing and why." Nobody cheered. The room was quiet in the way that rooms get quiet when everyone present has already made their decision and no longer needs to be convinced. The night before the crossing, the crew of the Perseverance ate breakfast at 0300 hours in the mess hall. It was not breakfast time. It was the middle of the ship's night cycle, and outside the viewport was contested space, and 12 hours from us was the Velhari corridor, and the largest engagement Earth had ever initiated. But someone, I never found out who, had decided the occasion called for eggs. Real eggs, from the protein stock. Someone had found a playlist of 20th century music on the archive drive and connected it to the mess hall speakers. Guitar and drums and voices that had been gone for over 100 years, filling the room with something that had nothing to do with tomorrow. I sat with my crew, Lena with her coffee held in both hands, Owen Clark eating his eggs with the concentrated attention of someone who had survived on protein bars for too long and had not yet stopped noticing that food could taste like something. Others. All of them people I had worked alongside for years, people whose particular skills and particular stubbornness and particular ways of fixing things I knew as well as I knew anything. We did not make speeches. We did not say the things that people in that situation are sometimes shown saying in the stories that get told about moments like this. We ate eggs and argued about whether a particular story about a training incident involving a cargo pod and some confused livestock was accurately remembered, or had improved significantly with each retelling. At 0555 hours, people drifted back to stations. At 0600 hours, the Perseverance crossed the exclusion zone boundary. 60 other ships crossed it at the same moment. Quiet. Coordinated. No announcement. The log noted the crossing. The coffee finished. The Velhari Armada appeared on long-range sensors 40 minutes into the transit and formed up with the efficiency of a force that had been doing this for a long time and was very good at it. 340 warships arranging themselves in layered defensive spread. The big carriers at the rear. Interceptor lines fanned forward in a wide crescent. Point defense platforms filling the gaps between, with overlapping fields of fire that left no meaningful blind approach from any standard attack vector. Full formation achieved in 11 minutes from initial alert. We had modeled 12 to 15, and I noted the difference. They were something to look at. Centuries of accumulated tactical development had produced a formation that resembled, from a distance, a cathedral assembling itself in space. Precise. Immense. Built for a specific purpose with the unhurried confidence of something that has worked reliably for a very long time. The formation had one primary function. It was designed to receive and neutralize a conventional missile offensive. Their documented interception rate against standard projectile salvos was 94%. We had cross-referenced that figure against their actual engagement record in 6 documented conflicts. The real number was slightly higher. We did not fire missiles. Gordon Vane gave the order at 0441 hours. The fleet divided on a precise diagonal. Half went forward, directly toward the interceptor crescent, loud on every frequency the Armada was monitoring, exactly as visible and as threatening as 61 warships are expected to look when they are engaging a force 5 times their size and have not yet found a way out. The other half went downward relative to the formation's orientation, into the geometric space beneath the crescent's lowest tier, the specific gap that 6 months of analyzing captured Velhari tactical sensor data had identified as the zone where their overlapping grids produced a shadow large enough to contain what we needed to conceal. At 0443 hours, the Suri fleet, running their independent exercises in adjacent space, activated their electronic warfare arrays. Owen Clark had spent 4 years learning to read Velhari sensor hardware. He had spent the last 3 months of those 4 years learning to generate the specific frequency signatures that Velhari targeting systems were designed to interpret as friendly internal traffic. Not silence, which would trigger automatic threat protocols. Signal. The right signal. The kind that told the Armada's targeting architecture that the noise it was receiving originated inside its own formation. The Velhari Armada's right flank opened fire on the Velhari Armada's left flank at 0444 hours. 4 ships first, then 9. The formation's coordinated command architecture, which was the source of its strength, became the mechanism by which the confusion propagated. The correction orders went out on the same frequency as the interference. Corrections generated counter-corrections. Ships that had been executing coordinated fire solutions began querying their targeting systems for clarification that was not going to arrive. The formation began to drift at the edges. Small movements that compounded across 340 hulls into something that was not drift anymore. The Keth Enforcement Squadron broke from the main formation at 0447 hours to engage us on the approach vector. Standard response. Protocol-driven. Exactly what the models predicted and exactly what the second half of the approach had been designed around. Our 61 ships did not retreat. We reformed. Tighter. The shape had no designation in any Council tactical database, because no species in the Council's recorded history had used it. Gordon called it the press, after an old Earth sport that involved organized momentum into other people. The formation was not built to survive sustained fire from the Keth squadron's full weapons output. It was not designed to outlast their capacity to hit us. It was designed to make the act of hitting us produce costs that accumulated faster than the squadron's command structure had planned for, until the people making decisions on that side began arriving at conclusions their mission brief had not prepared them to reach. The first volley hit at 0451 hours. The Perseverance took a glancing impact on the port shield array. The hull rang with it, a vibration that moved through everything: the chair, the floor, the soles of your feet. 2 ships in formation took severe damage. One of them was the Aldridge out of Cape Town Station. I watched it fall out of formation on my scope, and I put it in the locked place and kept moving, because the engagement was ongoing, and there was nothing else to do with it right now. We did not scatter. We held. We compressed. The Keth fired again. We were still there, closer now than the previous position, closer than their fire solution assumed we would be, given that all standard tactical modeling said the rational response to a second volley from a superior force was to create distance. We were not creating distance. I heard Owen Clark on the tactical channel from one of the retrofitted cargo ships. He said, "Their targeting solution keeps calculating for a break right that is not happening." I said, "Because a rational opponent breaks right." He said, "Yeah, I know. It is really something." At minute 19, the Keth squadron pulled back 50 kilometers to re-establish their fire solution and regroup. They expected us to use the gap to disperse. We tightened further. The next 23 minutes in the engagement log are documented with precision. What the log cannot record is the specific quality of watching a calculation fail in real time. Watching a force that was very good at a particular approach discover that the thing they were fighting was not responding to that approach in any of the ways the approach assumed. It does not feel like winning from the inside. It feels like standing on ground that should have given way, and watching the other side gradually, reluctantly, expensively update their understanding of the ground. At minute 42, the Velhari Armada disengaged. Not destroyed. I want that to be precise in the record, because the story sometimes gets told as though it ended differently. 340 warships withdrew. Their formation was seriously disrupted. Their casualties were significant, and their casualty projection models were, according to what we learned later, flagging incoming estimates as probable input error, because the numbers were in territory those models had no precedent for. It was not input error. We lost 9 ships. I have said that before, and I will say it again here without dressing it differently. 9 ships is not a rounding error. It is not a clean price for a clean outcome. 163 people. I knew 14 of them. Marcus Webb of the Aldridge had a daughter at University on Earth, studying marine biology, specifically the restoration of deep-water coral systems in the Pacific, and he talked about her on long patrols, with the specific and obvious pride of a parent watching a child find something they love. His name is in the log. I have not changed how the log displays it. At minute 39, with the Armada in withdrawal and the Keth squadron attempting to regroup, Admiral Revash sent a transmission on an open channel, not to Gordon Vane, not to Earth Command, not encrypted, open, addressed to the Perseverance, addressed to my name. The translation came through, 14 seconds after the signal. Revash said, "What are you?" Not a tactical question, not a threat assessment request. An honest question, the kind that comes from a decorated commander of 6 suppression campaigns who has just watched his doctrine fail in 42 minutes against a fleet a fifth the size of his own, and is trying, genuinely, to update his model. I read it. Then I went back to the engagement logs, because the Keth were still regrouping, and we were still inside contested space, and the answer to that question was going to require more room than the current moment allowed. There would be room later. There would, as it turned out, be a specific room, with 4,000 seats and acoustics designed to carry every word to every corner. The council chamber at Velhari Prime held 4,000 representatives of 216 species. It was the largest enclosed space I had ever stood inside. The tiers curved upward from the main floor to a ceiling high enough that the upper galleries had their own separate atmospheric control systems, and the acoustics were designed so that every voice from the main floor reached every point in the room with equal clarity. Every breath was slightly too audible. Every shift of weight could be heard by someone. I had been in this room before, twice. Once as a delegation member for a routine Accord review session, watching decisions get made about us from the gallery. Once at the main floor lectern to present the formal protest over the Johansson's dream case closure, which was received, and acknowledged, and filed, and did not change anything that mattered. That was the last time I had been here before this. This time I came in through the main floor entrance. Dress uniform. Earth's flag on my left shoulder. The same one it had always been. The blue marble on black. Designed when we thought we were alone out there, and chose, for reasons I have always found quietly remarkable, to represent ourselves with an image of the whole planet. Not a nation, not a territory. The whole thing, as seen from outside. I had not slept in 31 hours. The collar of the dress uniform was slightly too tight. The chamber was warmer than the environmental specifications called for. The High Arbiter of the Galactic Council sat at the center of the main floor bench, ancient in a way that made the word feel like an understatement. Their species had been part of the Council since before it carried its current name. They carried the stillness of something that has watched events unfold for a very long time, and has developed a specific and refined relationship with surprise. The Arbiter read the charges into the record, 17 subclauses, covering every aspect of what Earth had done, from the moment Resolution 7 passed, to the moment we walked into this room. Breach of the peacekeeping accord, unauthorized engagement of Council enforcement vessels, violation of the Orion exclusion zone, coordinated military action without Council sanction. All accurate, in the main. The Arbiter set the document down on the bench in front of them, looked at me. They said, "Commander Devar, speak." 4,000 beings in absolute silence. The atmospheric systems in the upper galleries cycling. I had a prepared statement, 12 pages. Legal precedents, and careful structural argument, the kind of thing that Claire Ashford had spent 6 weeks building, and called the strongest procedural case she had ever assembled. It was good work. It was precise and well-sourced, and it would have taken 19 minutes to deliver, and it would have landed in this chamber the way every other careful, precise thing we had ever brought to this room had landed. I set it aside. I said, "We did not come here to conquer you." The acoustics carried it to the top tier the way they were designed to. I said, "If that was what we wanted, this conversation would not be happening, because there would be nothing left here to have a conversation with. I am not saying that to threaten you. I know it sounds like a threat. I am saying it because I need the precise meaning to be understood before I say what I am actually here to say." Silence. I kept going. I said, "We want a seat at this table. Full membership. Equal standing in the language of the Council's own records. Not pending assessment. Not restricted. Equal. Full transit rights for all Earth-flagged vessels across Council space. No permits. No processing windows. No 14 hours while someone presses a distress beacon every 40 seconds and the form tells them to wait." The chamber held its silence. 4,000 beings and the atmospheric systems. I said, "I am not asking for an apology. I understand what it costs to apologize to something you have not fully regarded as an equal, and I am not here to spend the next decade in hearings where careful expressions of regret get filed and produce no change in the underlying situation. I am asking for a treaty. Real language, equal terms on both sides of every clause. A seat at this table that does not come with an asterisk." I looked toward the Keth delegation gallery. I said, "We will go home after this session. We will return to our space and remain there, not because a boundary or an accord requires it, but because we choose to. That distinction is the point. The containment zone could not keep us in it. The accord could not keep us in it. We crossed that line because we chose to. And we are standing in this room because we chose to stand here, and the next choice depends entirely on what this chamber decides to do in the hours ahead." I said, "That is everything I have." I sat down. The chamber stayed silent for long enough that I had time to look at my hands. Steady, the same way they had been steady eating lunch after the case closure. The same steadiness that had once kept me awake because of what it implied about how much of this I had absorbed without it breaking anything visible. It meant something different now. Now it was just the hands that belonged to the person who had crossed the line and walked through the door and said the words. The new Keth ambassador rose, younger than Ravash. working carefully to project a composure that was mostly succeeding. They said, "And if we refuse?" The room waited for the answer. I thought about what I had prepared for this question. 3 versions: the measured one, the direct one, the precise legal construction Claire had built that was airtight and would take 90 seconds and would be correct in every way that mattered on paper. I said, "Then we will be back, and we will not be running on hope that time." The Keth ambassador sat down. The arbiter looked at their document, at me, at the document. The chamber did not move. The arbiter said, "There will be a recess." The negotiations lasted 11 months. They were not clean or simple or quick. Some sessions were the particular exhaustion of legal argument over precise language, where the real argument is never about the words themselves, but about what the words commit you to, and what they allow you to continue avoiding. And you have to hold the entire architecture of the agreement in your head, while someone carefully tries to reshape a load-bearing section of it from the inside. Claire Ashford held it every session. She held the whole structure in her head, with the focused endurance of someone who had stopped tracking how long she had been awake, and was simply continuing because the work required it. Earth got full membership, equal standing in all official designations and records. The Omega restricted classification was formally struck, and the removal was entered into the permanent record of every member species in the Council. Full transit rights for all Earth-flagged vessels without permit requirements. The containment zone boundaries were dissolved, and the dissolution was documented and distributed to all enforcement commands. The reparations negotiation was separate from everything else, and it took longer. The Keth delegation came prepared for financial compensation, standard practice, a council-administered fund, a formal acknowledgement attached, a process they had worked through before with other species. It was a known shape, and they were confident in it. Our delegation declined. We put forward a counter-proposal, a formal council resolution, to be read aloud in the primary language of every member species at the next full session, containing a complete accounting of the Johansson's dream incident, cause, timeline, the specific sequence, the processing window, the 14 hours and 17 minutes, the signal pulsing every 40 seconds, and the names, all 2,312 of them. The Keth delegation noted that this was not a standard form of reparation. Claire Ashford said, "We are aware." She said it in the same voice she used for everything, completely level, completely clear about what she meant, and not in any way interested in discussing alternatives. The resolution passed, scheduled for the next full council session. Council language staff would conduct the reading in 216 languages. Our team provided the name list, verified against the ship manifest, against New Oslo Station's departure records, against the educational district registration filed by Reykjavik 41 days before the transit. 41 children. We had their names from the school's registration document, their teachers' names too. Everyone on the list. The council's planning staff suggested, during the logistics phase, that a representative sample might serve the same purpose, given the time a complete reading would require. Our delegation declined. The reading was scheduled, and it proceeded as scheduled, and it took 6 hours and 4 minutes. I sat in the observer tier gallery for all of it, not in a formal delegation seat, in one of the open seats, the kind without an identifier, the kind that belongs to no one specifically, and anyone generally. I wanted to be in the room. I did not want to be on the floor. The floor was formal record. The gallery was for listening. The languages cycled through in order. Most of them I did not know. The council language staff read steadily, and without haste, and the names moved through phonologies that reshaped them, recognizable under the reshaping, carrying the same identities through entirely different mouths. Around the 3rd hour, the Suri observer, the same one from the Geneva session, moved from their delegation seat to the observer tier 2 rows below mine. They did not look at me. They sat down and they listened to the names. We did not speak. There was nothing to say that the room was not already saying. When the last name finished in the 216th language, the chamber went quiet. Not the calculating quiet of a room deciding something. A different kind. The kind that comes when something is restored that was taken before it could properly exist. The kind that does not ask you to respond to it, only to sit in it for a moment and acknowledge what it contains. I sat in it. Then I put my notebook in my pocket and left. Lena Marsh was at the transit bay with her tin of coffee and 2 cups. She poured one without asking and handed it to me. Worst coffee I had ever tasted. I drank all of it. She said, "So, how did it go?" I said, "We have a seat at the table." She nodded, poured herself another cup, said, "About time." She went back inside. I stood at the viewport for a moment before following. Velhari Prime below, the corridor behind us. Somewhere farther, the old boundary, the line that was now a different kind of line. Somewhere farther still, a debris field 12 kilometers across, a cargo container with a cartoon sun, in a slow drift through empty space. 2,312 names. 6 hours and 4 minutes. I went inside. The Perseverance smelled like engine coolant and old coffee, and something that might have been the memory of the eggs from the morning before we crossed the line. Terminal. Active voice. Clear language. Earth holds equal standing in the Galactic Council. The accord is renegotiated. The exclusion zone is dissolved. We are coming home. Sent at 1847 hours. Then I went to the mess hall, and someone had made rice and vegetables, and it was warm, and I ate it. And outside the viewport the stars were the same stars they had always been, old and indifferent and scattered across the dark in every direction, like questions we were still in the beginning stages of learning to answer. We were strange. We were specific about it. We ran toward the things that the sensible calculation said to run from, and we held the ground past the point where the math said to leave it, and we carved the names into whatever surface would hold them, and we came back to read them out loud, even when it took 6 hours. We named all of them. We always would. That was, in the end, the only thing that really needed to be understood about us. The galaxy had wanted to know what we were. We were the species that counts. Every single one. Especially when it takes a very long time.